steal your flame. Go on, take it back again.
Check 1, 2.
You've been waiting on a moment, waiting on a sign, waiting for them to call your name. You're next in line, waiting for your
How's everybody
time
doing
to
this
come. You're 15
Good?
minutes in the sun.
Sounds good up here.
Don't you find it strange? God made 4 seasons and only one spring.
This song is called
So just let the ground rest. 'Cause if it's not
When
right
inspiration
now,
has
it's
met
for
it.
you gotta go. I know that now, just let you go. Waiting on the moment, waiting on the sign. Wait for the lights to change. You won't feel so stuck, so left behind. Waiting for the day to come. You can leave behind wash it all flowers only grow once they feel spring. So just let the ground rest. If it's not right now, it's for we can go. I know this is now. Just let the ground rest.
It's called Learning How to Feel. It's called The Day That I Met You.
We've seen the glory of the Lord rise, broken lives restored, but not by governments nor fire.
Trying to figure out
Son of God, he walks among us. So turn the key and take a drive. I never felt so low. This road is spinning out of control. I need you to take it to my grace. A heartbeat that all will be released. Not by military might, but by the man who bled and died. We've seen grace and ocean bow before human feet. Dawn is breaking now. Darkness must retreat, for the Son of God walks among us. Signs and wonders here, held in human hand. A kingdom carried near, scorning.
This is always one of my favorite worship songs. And it's called You Are in Control. And I just always find it so great that there's something that I can count on and don't have to worry about the future and what's going on. I know, especially in times like this where just everything's up in the air, business, family, holidays. So it's always great for me personally just to know that, like I said, God is in control of my life. You are my shepherd, I have no needs. You lead me by peaceful streams, and you refresh my life. You hold my hands and you guide my steps, and I could walk through the valley of death, and I won't be afraid, because you are in control, because you are in control, because you are in control. You are my shepherd, I have no need. You lead me by peaceful streams, and you refresh my life. You hold my hands and you guide my steps. I could walk through the valley of death, and I won't be afraid. You are in control.
All right. We're going to talk about how God is in control today, but I got a little news before we start. I've been up here every week complaining about my busted iPhone. It was a 10. It was 2 years old. It wouldn't hold a charge. I'm not going to say that it inspired this series, but it certainly helped me remember every day that recharging is important when you've got a 2-year-old iPhone, and you know that moment when I'm not saying an update comes out, but all of a sudden your iPhone goes from holding a charge to lasting about 2 hours. But good news, I actually have a new one today. I know you were worried about that. And here's the thing, when you get the new iPhone, like, I've been walking around with the flashlight on because I just don't care anymore. Like, I got all the power in the world, and people go, the light's on in your pocket? And I go, I know, I don't care. Because I'm like streaming video and FaceTiming people and leaving the light on. I mean, I'm going crazy. And I worked 12 hours the other day and came home, and I still had 47%. And I was like, it just doesn't get any better than that moment when you go from something that doesn't hold a charge to, I might just leave the light on the whole time. I don't even care anymore. I'm so happy to have an iPhone that holds its charge. But here's the thing I was thinking about, like, probably most of us don't feel like that right now. And Mike said it, like, all of a sudden in our world, here we are the week of Thanksgiving, when normally we just think about, like, how many pies are going to fit on that table? Like, that's my thought. Like, how many pies can I actually talk my wife into having? Like, that's my biggest thought. And now we have all sorts of other concerns. And it's interesting because you're starting to hear in the news, like, uncertain times and unprecedented times, and there's no toilet paper, which those two things seem to just be tied together, which is maybe why once we don't have toilet paper, it gets to be uncertain times. I believe those two things are tied together. But all of a sudden, like the pandemic is picking back up, and all of a sudden we're talking about, like, our jobs and our future, and should we invite grandma over? And it's very unsettling. And what used to be a no-brainer maybe in other years, or a time that we could just sort of, like, we're going to take the week off. And even if let's just be honest, like, even if you work Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you're not really working before Thanksgiving. Like, the world sort of takes a week off, and we're just thinking about eating and relaxing and hanging with friends, but maybe not this year. We got more things to think about, and life seems a lot more uncertain, and people are concerned and people are nervous, but I think of no better time than to think about recharging, and not the silly kind of recharging that I've done with my busted old iPhone that I'm not thinking about now, but recharging our souls, recharging after a very difficult year, after a lot of uncertainty and a lot of upheaval and a lot of things that just drain us. There's something about uncertainty that just drains you. And so this month at Action Church, we've been talking about sort of the opposite, the fact that the Bible in Philippians 4 says, rejoice in the Lord. And again, I say rejoice, and I've confessed every week, but it's true. Like, I used to think of that as something that Christians had to do. And just the fact I said had to do kind of shows where I'm at. Like, I would think, like, oh, I guess as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, I have to get up a little earlier in the morning or stay up a little later at night and rejoice because that's on my list. But the truth is, I was so wrong about that, because I've come to realize that it's really recharge. The reason why God cares about, and why Paul cared about, and why David cared about us rejoicing is not because God needs it. It's because we need it. We need to recharge, and again I say recharge, because we get drained. Our souls get drained, our spirits get drained, our attitudes get drained. And so what I've come to think, and what I've come to tell you every week, is that rejoicing is just sort of meditating on the right things. And I realize more and more the older I get that we're all meditators. I don't think that's really the right way to say that, but we all meditate. Every one of you meditates. We don't just sit there and have blank minds. We have racing thoughts. We have things that preoccupy us. And generally, just as humans, they're sort of the opposite of what recharges you. Like, if you have a recurring thought, it's probably a painful one. If you have a recurring thought, it's probably not something that builds you up. It's probably something that tears you down. If you have a racing, recurring thought, it's probably something shameful and not something that you're proud of. And it's a worry. It's not a memory of past successes. And we're just sort of wired as humans, I think, to look into the future when things get a little uncertain, when we are, and can we just say this? It's always uncertain. You know, I know that it says unprecedented times and uncertain times on every commercial, but guess what? It always was. But somehow, when we face those times where we're not sure what's going to happen next, we sort of forget all the times we've been in that before. Even when things have turned out in ways we couldn't have imagined, that God, if you're a Christian this morning, I would tell you this morning, like, God has just blessed our family and taken us through some of the most difficult times, but we forget those in uncertainty so many times. And so I want to talk to you about rejoicing and recharging this morning. Now, David, King David, who was a real guy, by the way, not a fairy tale guy, not a Bible story guy. David was a king of Israel, and we know that from archaeology, not from the Bible. A real guy who ruled Israel. And according to the Bible, which I believe, just, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this. He was a tough guy. Let's just say that. Like, I got a couple of ways I'd like to say it. But here's the thing. Like, David was sort of hitman, mercenary, musician, rock star, king. Everything you could sort of imagine that's larger than life, that was King David. He's the one who killed the giant when he's a teenager. He killed Goliath with 3 small stones and a slingshot. And yet, he talks about rejoicing more than anybody in Scripture. And so I want to read to you something we scrolled way, way, way back in David's Instagram. And I think that this will be helpful to us. David said this. He said, "No wonder my heart is glad and I rejoice, because my body rests in safety." Now, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of us would like a little safety, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of uncertain times, in the middle of, and it's funny because just the way this year worked out, isn't it? Like, every time you go, I know what's going to happen next, it turned out you didn't. And that's the way that life is right now. And so I can't think of anything better if I could tell you, like, hey, this is going to be recharging today. This is going to help you feel better about the future. You're going to be able to relax a little more over Thanksgiving than just to go, hey, I have safety for you. Like, you don't have to worry because there's safety. And that's what David said. And it's kind of interesting because that's not a super David-y sounding sentiment. Because one thing you should know about Psalms, and I hope you read the Psalms, because as much as David rejoiced, David had a lot of downer songs. David was the first, I think, emo writer. Here's a normal sort of David psalm, and I just want to read this to you just to remind you that why would David say he could rejoice and be glad because his body was in safety when he wrote things like this: "Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am distressed. I am in distress. Tears blur my eyes, and my body and soul are withering away. I am dying from grief, and my years are shortened by sadness, and sin has drained my strength, and I am wasting away from within." This is not something you probably post to encourage yourself. "I am scorned by my enemies and despised by my neighbors. Even my friends are afraid of coming near to me. And when they see me on the street, they run the other way. I am ignored as if I were dead, as if I were a broken pot. I have heard many rumors about me, and I am surrounded by terror, and my enemies conspire against me, plotting to take my life." And normally you would think this is a guy who's just like got an overactive imagination, but David wasn't joking. As far as we know from history and Scripture, all of those things were true. And so it sort of makes you wonder, like, well, how can he say, because you'd like to say that, wouldn't you? Like, one thing I'm not worried about is I'm safe. Like, I don't have to worry about my future, and I can sort of recharge and relax because my future is safe. Even my body's safe. I'm not even worried. So I want to read Psalm 16 today. And I hope as we go into Thanksgiving week, that that you and I can sort of take Psalm 16 and learn what David knew. And it starts out like this. It says, "Keep me safe, O God." And that's a pretty good start for the psalm for us today. Not just because we're in a pandemic, but because it seems like everything's in the air, right? The future is unknown. Keep me safe, O God, for I have come to you for refuge. And I said to the Lord, you are my master, and every good thing comes from you. And the godly people in the land are my true heroes. I take pleasure in them. So this whole thing starts out with David sort of giving us a plan for safety. And it's a pretty good plan, I think. David's plan for safety is not what you and I would think. We would think like solid investments, hazmat suit, quarantine, maybe a good security system, a dog and a gun. Like, we have all these ideas about what would bring us safety in this world, and none of them showed up in David's list. David said his plan for safety, like he said, I'm going to depend on these things. I'm going to depend on God. I'm going to submit to God, which is important. And then he said, like, the people that value what God values, they're my heroes. I'm going to look to the people that are God people, that are godly people. And so I'm basically going to think the people are good that God thinks are good, not that my culture thinks are good. So right away, that's a little different than maybe you and I would think of safety, right? Like, especially when you're the king. Like, at this point, David's writing this psalm, and he's actually, his hands are actually registered as weapons. When you were kids, you hoped that could happen. You heard about people that had to register their hands as weapons. That's David. Like, David is in charge. He's crazy strong. He's killed a giant. He's killed, according to popular music of that time, tens of thousands of people. He's not afraid of anything, but yet his plan for safety is depending on God and submitting to God and valuing what God's value. And I would tell you this morning, even though that sounds a little strange and it sounds a little counterintuitive, I don't think there's a better way to be safe. Now, David continues and he says this, and it seems sort of off topic if you think about it. In a way, it sort of seems off topic because he's like, troubles multiply for those who chase other gods. And I will not take part in their sacrifices of blood or even speak the names of their gods. Lord, you alone are my inheritance, my cup of blessing. You guard all that is mine, and the land you have given me is a pleasant land. What a wonderful inheritance. I will bless the Lord who guides me, and even at night, my heart instructs me. See, I think this part is true. He said, troubles multiply for those who chase after other gods. See, there's a difference. And if you're not a Christian this morning, I am so glad you're here. And be as skeptical as you wish, and understand that I'm coming to you as a guy who paints houses for a living. But I'm just pointing people to something ancient. And you might be a Christian this morning and think, well, Don, I don't really see people worshiping other gods around me, I don't really see that many altars in my neighborhood where they're sacrificing goats. And if you do, I don't want to live in your neighborhood. But I don't see a lot of people offering blood sacrifices. And so I think this part might be a little outdated. I don't think so at all, gang. I think we worship all sorts of things. We put them above God. We make that our number one priority. It might be money. It might be power. It might be fame. Oh, my goodness, we do worship fame in American culture. It might be safety. We worship, we're preppers. We're secure. We have a plan for everything. And we put all of our hope in those things. And then he said, I won't take part in their blood sacrifices. You might go, well, who does that? Oh, all of us. All of us worship something. And no, we might not actually let blood, but we sacrifice something. If you're going to worship money, you're going to sacrifice something in your life. In fact, it's probably could be family, could be relationships, could be your reputation. And if it's fame, oh my goodness, you're going to sacrifice something. If it's sex or if it's pleasure, you are going to sacrifice something. We all do. It's human nature. It's not a Bible thing. It's not a church thing. It's just a thing. Whatever you place the most value on, you will make sacrifices for it. In fact, that's how we know you value it. That's how we know what you worship, because what you're willing to make sacrifices for. And we all know people who make, and it's only obvious to us when it's something we wouldn't do. You know, like the guy who's an ultra marathoner, and you just go, God, why would you spend all that money and spend all your time running and you go, I don't know. I don't value that, but that person does. And I'm not even saying, oh, they're worshiping ultra marathoning, but they're making big time sacrifices for something you or I wouldn't. And that's what David's saying. He's like, here's the thing. The God I serve, and as a Christian years later, the same God that David served, the God of the Bible, he doesn't want anything from me. He wants something for me. And David had a really good handle on that. He's like, it's not calling for me to sacrifice in the way that other gods call for me to sacrifice. Oh, sure, we make sacrifices for God. Those are actually to remind us, and I guess what he was saying, sort of like more money, more problems. He's right. He's like, troubles multiply. And that's still true, right? Like when you're chasing something, when you're worshiping something, when you're making sacrifices for it, and that's your number one thing, your troubles multiply. And so David said something different. David said, Lord, you alone are my inheritance, and you're my cup of blessing, and you guard all that is mine. And I think that's so weird for him to say if you think about it. Who's going to steal something from David? But David is saying, like the good country song says, like David is saying, like, you know what? When it comes down to it, you know who I trust to guard my stuff? God. And I'm not even sure like any of us would say that. Like, I'm like, I trust God to guard all that I have, but I have an alarm system. You know, and I got deadbolts, and I got a gun, and 2 cats that are really fat, and you would trip over them if you broke into my house. I guarantee it. And then, if you survive that, my daughter would kick your butt. That's what I know. But David is saying something different, right? David is saying, I trust God to guard all that I have. And the reason why he can say that, is because he's like, because you're all I care about. Like, all of my eggs are in your basket. Like, the thing that I care about, like, all the stuff that really matters to me, you're my inheritance. You're the thing that I'm going to worship, and so I'm going to trust you with everything I have. And that's a pretty big statement for a king who's like an international mercenary warrior giant killer. And then he says this, and man, I don't want us to miss this. And I want to just talk to you a little bit about this morning. He says, the land you have given me is a pleasant land. What a wonderful inheritance. See, here's what I want to remind you about this morning a little bit. Don't skip Thanksgiving. And I don't mean like you have to invite grandma over. That's up to you. You know, I don't mean, no, that means that you have to do Thanksgiving like you always did. It might. And here's what I would tell you. You don't need me telling you what to do about your health or about your family, because I don't know. And you don't need some dude in Harrisburg telling you. You need to, as Christians, as people, even if you're not a Christian this morning, if you're an adult this morning, make wise decisions and decide like who you're going to invite over and where you're going to go. But don't allow that to cause you to skip Thanksgiving. I've been thinking about that. Like David in the middle of this psalm, he's like, I'm really thankful that I have this place called Israel to live. And don't forget, like, he's been, we want to talk about injustice, like he's been hunted, his life's been, attempted, his life's been attacked so many times. He spent years before this on the run. And in fact, we're not 100% sure he wasn't writing this when he was still on the run. But like, he spent years as a fugitive for injustice sake because he's never done anything against the country. He's actually saved the country, and his father-in-law, the king's trying to kill him, but he still goes, thank you. He stops to say thank you in the middle. And that's what I want to urge you. We need Thanksgiving more than ever. The way I read history, the first Thanksgiving wasn't exactly very secure either. I feel like there was a little illness and a little hunger and a little uncertainty for the Pilgrims and the Native Americans on that first Thanksgiving. So do not let your circumstances stop you from being grateful, because guess what, gang? We need that more than ever. And David he exemplifies that. In the middle of this talk, in the middle of this song or this writing, he shows gratitude. And that's what I want you to do. And not because I think it's nice instead of naughty, and not because like I get paid extra. I don't get paid any extra if you do that. But for you, list some things this week that you are grateful for. And if you have to make changes in the way you celebrate Thanksgiving, don't let that change the way you celebrate Thanksgiving, because that's so important. Here's what David said. And if you're wondering, like, well, how will I know? Well, good news. He said, I will bless the Lord who guides me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. And if you think this is some sort of weird Old Testament teaching, James, the brother of Jesus, said this in James 1:5. He said, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you, and he will not rebuke you for asking. And this is a real thing. I don't know how many times I go to sleep not knowing the answer about something. And I've learned to just be fine with that. Like years ago, I would lay there and stay. It's partly because I'm getting old and I can fall asleep at a stoplight. But like partially, I've learned to kind of let things go when have a decision to make. Recently had a decision to make. I'm like, I don't know which way to go. I don't know which. But I've learned to just be confident in going to sleep and going, God, guide me and direct me. I don't know. And not just staying awake thinking about it. But it's sort of remarkable how many times you sort of wake up in the morning and go, after that prayer and after that just, I'm going to go to sleep. And you just know. I think that's a thing. That's not just something that worked for David. At least I find that's true in my life. So many times if you just let it go and go, God, I don't know the answer to this. But even if it's not the next morning, even if it's much longer than that, we serve a God that tells us, like, if you need an answer to a situation, you should pray about it. Let's not forget that. So if you're concerned right now, like, what should I do about my health? What should I do about the pandemic? What should I do about my job? Who should I invite over? What should I do? You can actually pray about it, and God will give you an answer. He'll give you wisdom, which is way better than guidelines or anything I'm going to give you. And I trust that. And then he says this. And this, this is what I really want to zoom in on this morning. Because he says this. I know the Lord is always with me, and I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. And then he says the words that really attracted me to this psalm this week. No wonder my heart is glad, and I rejoice, because my body rests in safety. For you will not leave my soul among the dead, or allow your Holy One to rot in the grave. You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasures of living with you forever. You're kind of like, wait a minute. Like, David thought he was unbreakable? No wonder he's so happy. Like, if I thought I were unbreakable and nothing bad could ever happen to me, is that what it is? Is this some sort of like delusional thinking that he thinks he can't be harmed? I mean, I guess you would sort of feel that way after you'd been through what David has, but here's the good news. That was not true. And in fact, here's the thing. Like, you might think, oh, well, Don, that's Psalms. That's, a king of Israel 4,700 years ago. I don't see how that's, applicable to us at Action Church. We're Christians. We're not Jewish. We don't. Here's the thing. Do you know that a guy named Peter actually quoted those words in the very first sermon when the church started? Like, when this whole thing that you and I call Christianity, if you're a Christian this morning, when this whole thing, church, after Jesus leaves and they baptize the first followers in a church service, the very first one in Acts chapter 2, Peter chose, out of all the things that he could talk about, he chose to quote that scripture. I mean, it says this: King David said this about him, Jesus, and then he just quotes this thing that I just read you. I see the Lord is always with me, and I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. See, Peter thought this was important for Christians, for followers of Jesus, for new converts. No wonder my heart is glad, and my tongue shouts his praise. My body rests in hope, he says. For you will not leave my soul among the dead or allow your Holy One to rot in the grave. You have shown me the way of life, and you will fill me with the joy of your presence. Dear brothers, think about this. You can be sure that the patriarch David wasn't referring to himself, for he died and was buried, and his tomb is still here among us. Like, David didn't think he was never going to die, and we know that David died because we visited his tomb. Like, we don't know where David was buried now. We've seen, evidence of his reign. We've seen coinage. We've seen pottery, and we've seen, writings. But he's like, we know where he was buried because it's like the Liberty Bell. We visited there, which is sort of underwhelming also. But like, we visited his grave. Like, we know David died, and he said, think about this. You can be sure the patriarch David wasn't referring to himself, for he died and was buried, and his tomb is still here among us. But he was a prophet, and he knew God had promised with an oath that one of David's own descendants would sit on his throne. And Jesus was what? A descendant of David. David was looking into the future and speaking of the Messiah's resurrection. He was saying that God would not leave him among the dead, allow his body to rot in the grave. For God raised Jesus from the dead, and we are all witnesses of this. He's like, we are not talking about something that happened in the past. Like, we saw this happen, right? And he looks around the room at these, they had 3,000 converts that day, so many, many people, and he's like, we saw him, right? See, here's what I think David was saying. And Peter took that. And on the very first sermon, he was like, this is an example of how David knew that somehow he was going to live forever. David somehow knew, like, his body wasn't just going to rot in the grave and that would be the end. The reason why David said his body was safe is not because he didn't have trouble, not because he wasn't under attack, not because he didn't face illness, not because life was sweet for David. He's like, he just knew he was going to live forever, and not in the way that any of you think, because he died and we visited his tomb, but he knew in the future it would be proven by one of his relatives, Jesus, that that's not the end. In fact, it's not nearly the end when we die in God's plan. So I've been thinking about that. I was thinking about that like in light of my little problems with my iPhone. I solved my charging problem. And I didn't bust my iPhone open and put a new battery. Thank you, Apple. That's not possible anymore. I used to do that. I have the tools still. I remember like the old ones, you could just pop them open, put a new battery in, no more. But there's actually something better. I had an iPhone rebirth this week. Really, if you think about it, like I got the one with the 3 camera thingies on there. I don't know why you need 3 or 4 cameras, but it's better. I'm willing to pay extra for that because I knew it was better. And so I have no idea. I just get whichever one is the most expensive. That seems to be the way I like to do that. But here's the thing, not bragging, just saying. But like I was thinking like what I experienced this week. I've been complaining about how it won't keep a charge, and I'm running out of power every day, and, and I was actually joking, but I was like, that would be great if you could do that for bodies. Like, I am running out of charge each day. It seems like earlier in the day, the older I get, and the more things are breaking, and it's like, it would be great if you could just sort of have a rebirth, and that's exactly what happened this week, because I got my new phone. And then I put the other phone in the coffin. I'm sending it to a farm where it can play with other older iPhones. It's not dead. It's just being sent to a farm. But I placed it was very symbolic. I placed the old iPhone in its coffin. And it was weird because I realized, like, you never took those uncomfortable headphones out. They're still in there. Like, this is the complete set. And I found a power cord in the charging brick. I never took that out for some reason, so I placed it back in its little iPhone coffin, and I sent it away to the farm. But here's the cool part I got to tell you about. And if you've done this recently, you get it. But it just transferred. That was the only thing that happened good now, because honestly, a phone's a phone, right? They're all the same now. It doesn't really matter if you have a new one or an old one. They sort of look the same, act the same. They're too good. Like, we're too blessed with phones. Everything works, and it's just, but all it said is, like, lay your old phone near the new phone. And I was like, oh, this is kind of spooky and weird. And then all of a sudden, it's like, do you wish to transfer? I'm like, yes, I do. And then you take a picture of the weird, swirly, scary thing on the new phone, and it asks you to get a mark on your phone. No, it doesn't. It's like you take a picture of the new phone, and boom! Like less than an hour later, this phone is my old phone, only way better. And here's the thing about it. Because of that, I'm no longer OtterBox. Do you remember OtterBox? Anybody still have one? You remember that? Like iPhone 3 and 4, when you would take your nice functional iPhone and you would put it in a case and then put another case over that and then put a case over that and like lock it in a box and make it so big it would no longer fit in your pocket, and you go, but at least it's safe. And then like literally you would keep your phone safe for 2 years. I always did this, and people would say, why do you have that? Well, I got to keep it safe. And then like grandma who would keep the plastic on the couch for so many years until the couch was out of style, and then you would throw the couch away with the plastic on it. That was the way OtterBoxes were. You would put your phone in the giant case and make it sort of unusable and annoying, and then it would run out of battery, and you would turn it in exactly like you would have before, but it was safe. But now I'm not worried about that. And I'm not worried about that because I'm so rich I can buy an iPhone. No. I'm not worried about that because, see, I know that when this one breaks or when the battery gets beyond where it'll hold a charge, I'm just going to transfer it to a better one. And I don't have to worry because it's all in the cloud. And see, here's the thing. I think that's what David knew. In fact, I know that's what David knew. And that's what Peter said. And that's what's true for you and me this morning. It's not that we don't have to worry that there's a pandemic and, we're invincible and we'll never catch it. We might. People in the church have. And it's not even, it won't affect us. Maybe it will. And it's not that we go, God protects my finances so they can never go down. Oh, no. We've all lost jobs, and we've all had tough times. And if you haven't, you probably will. And it's not even that we can go into Thanksgiving and go, well, at least nothing bad's going to happen to my family. My kids are going to be safe, and they're never going to have a job loss or a problem in their marriage, or they're never going to have anything bad happen to them. No, not true either. Well, at least I'm never going to get sick because I'm a Christian, or at least none of those things are true. But I think the reason why David could say, no wonder my heart is glad. I can rejoice, I can relax, I can recharge because my body is safe. It's sort of the same feeling I have about my iPhone. I'm not tossing this across the room. I'm not driving nails with it. I'm not unaware that bad things can happen with the new phone. But I'm not nearly as worried as I used to now that I know I can just transfer to a better one. And I'm not putting a giant OtterBox on it either anymore. And I'm not going to live my life in a giant OtterBox, worried and scared about what might happen. And I'm not just talking about a pandemic. I'm talking about everything else, from politics to financial crisis to anything that could possibly happen in 2021, although some of you are certain 2021 is going to be a good year. And as I said earlier today, I hope you're right. I really do. But I'm just confident, as David was, as Peter was, as you should be if you're a Christian, that if you will store it in the clouds, the worst that can happen to any of us is that we get to trade these old, breaking bodies in for a better one. And that's not so bad, is it? So I want to pray with you. And I want to send you out, hopefully, and I want Mike to come back up here. And what a great song he led into that, because that's exactly what I was talking about today. I just wanted you to have confidence that you don't have to feel bad one bit about going, I'm just going to be thankful. I'm going to celebrate Thanksgiving. I'm going to be grateful, and I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to recharge and rejoice. Because Thanksgiving is rejoicing, and we need to do that. We're going to recharge. And we shouldn't, as Christians, have a lot of worries that the world has around us, because we have a different idea of how life works. And they can kind of go, well, how can you sort of celebrate Thanksgiving and just be so happy and grateful in a year like this? Oh, because I don't have to worry, because it's in the clouds. And the worst that can happen to me is someday I'm going to transfer into a much, much better body. Dear Jesus, God in heaven, we are so, so, so grateful for this truth. And God, we don't think about it a lot because there's life. But it does sort of change everything when you realize that if we will serve you like David did, we sort of have everything to gain and nothing to lose. And God, I pray for those who are sick and those who are suffering and those who are going through difficult times. God, we don't discount that a bit. God, we pray that we would be a comfort to them. But God, I pray that you would be a comfort to the rest of us who have worries and have fears, have concerns, and they're valid concerns in this world we live in, about our health and our finances and our family and our futures. But God, I pray that this would be an amazing time of Thanksgiving for us as a church. A time of outpouring of gratitude. A time of recharging and rejoicing. Because God, we put our trust in you. And we trust you to keep everything that we have guarded and safe in a way that we could never, ever do on our own. In your name we pray. Amen.
Something that can be rearranged. 'Cause every day starts out anew, but your skies might not always be clear and blue. So I'll take it a day at a time, trying to find my peace of mind. And it's just not the same. It's just not the same. turn the key and open up the door. Looking at all of the different faces, but I'm standing in all of the familiar places. I'm looking and looking and I'm looking around, trying to find my heart and lost and found. It's just not there. I'm asking people, but nobody seems to care. It's just not the same. It's just not the same anymore. It's just not the same. So turn the key and open up the door. So don't let life pass you by. The next thing you know, your days seem to fly. The next thing I knew, I was standing still, standing on top of this hill, looking down. It's just not the same. It's just not the same anymore. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. No, no, no. It's just not the same. So turn the key and open up turn the key and walk on through the turn the key and shut behind you the door. Shut behind you the door.
Evening or day this morning. Sorry, I've been working night shift, so everything's a little weird for me right now. Also, disclaimer, if I cough, I was swabbed, I'm negative, so I just want to let you go. I feel like if I sneeze, I don't want to scare you. Okay, so next week is the Deck the Halls time, so we're going to get the church all decked out for Christmas. I know I look forward to this every year. I know a lot of you guys do too. So come early, and then we will get everything ready. I think we need Christmas cheer this year more than anything else. Also out, we've started decking the halls a little bit early, as you guys have probably already seen. Our tree is out front, and we are doing, as you guys know, I'm so proud of our teens. They talked last week about the importance of what their service project is this year. And we are loading up these kiddos with so much love that they need so desperately. So on your way out, please feel free to grab an ornament. We are sponsoring them. We are trying to create something for them that they've never had before, and there's so much Christ in it. So grab an ornament and bring it back unwrapped. I know a lot of you guys are watching or listening virtually right now. First of all, hi. I hope you guys are doing well. But you can still be a part of this too. We can make arrangements for you to come get an ornament, drop off a gift, make a monetary donation. We can do the shopping. We're willing to be flexible this year. We just want to make sure these kiddos are taken care of. And speaking of which, that leads into December 13th. We are Shannon's hosting the ladies' night here. We're going to be doing a craft that kind of aids to the service project that's happening. So that's going to be December 13th at 5:30. Bring a pack of toilet paper and bring a teenage or young adult size hat and scarf. You can get them at the Dollar Tree. It doesn't have to be fancy. This is going to be a way that we serve these teens without just handing them things. We're making a craft with it. And Shannon told me to tell you guys that she does not cook, but KK is going to be serving a whole assortment of delicious Spanish food that I cannot pronounce, but sounds so good. So come and KK will feed us, and it will be great, and we'll get that kicked off. December 20th is actually the Christmas party that we're having for the teens. The youth group is heading it up because they're the best in the whole world. And we do need some adult volunteers. So come if you want. We're going to have our teens plus some other teens. Our kiddos are going to be doing most of the leading, but adult supervision is always helpful. So let us know if you're interested in that. You can grab me, my husband Mike, or Mike Greek, or anybody. Just grab somebody and be like, hey, tell me about youth. And then, my husband, Mike Hannigan. Sorry, I've known them both for almost an equal amount of time. Mike Hannigan, he runs the kids program, as you guys know. So he is looking for a copy of the movie Robots. He does that, he kind of fits together his sermon series for our kiddos based on movies that he shows little clips of. We don't have that. If you guys have a copy, a DVD or Blu-ray of that, let us know. If not, we'll figure it out, but we always want to go to you guys first. So let us know if you have a copy of Robots. And then lastly, invite, invest, and get involved. You guys know the spiel. Now it's more important than ever as we try to support our communities and each other. Show up, and if you aren't safe to do so, we totally get that. You can still support us financially as we go through this time. Get involved in your community. I know 2021 is probably going to be unprecedented too, but I just want to say, I've never been more happy to do it with you guys. It's going to be a good year for Action Church. Okay. All right. Have a good week, and maybe see you next week for decorations. Great, and we'll get that kicked off. December 20th is... Great, and we'll get that kicked off. December 20th is...